Hello, beautiful ladies and gents, and welcome to today's video, where we're going to be doing a husband versus wife movie review on 1917.
In your own time, gentlemen.
Must be something big if the General's here.
You have a brother in the 2nd Battalion.
Yes, sir.
They're walking into a trap.
So, to start us off, we're going to go through an express version of the review in total, because this is attempt number 3. Yeah, as far as I'm aware, your videos don't have terrible technical difficulties in their infancy from when you started, but now they've come to fruition. The teenage years of them.
This is the time. The time has come, and it is terrible. So we are going to do this. This is the final time. If it doesn't work this time, we are not filming it again.
And in fact, we're going to change our opinions about 1917 to be neither good nor bad, but so neutral and blasé it doesn't deserve a review.
Pretty much. So why don't you give us like a quick overview of the plot?
Sure. So 1917, if you're not already familiar, although you should be, 1917 is a World War I movie about 2 British soldiers given a mission that they have to accomplish to hove a set of orders a few miles on the war front in France to a nearby village to deliver a message to a group of soldiers to call off an attack, which has turned out to be a trap that the Germans have set up.
Yeah.
So that's the level of plot that this movie has, because the movie is not about the story. It's not about the plot. It's not really about character development. It's about the experience of the characters and what they're going through.
So Jacob, when we saw this movie, was incredibly enthusiastic. He loved it. It was his favorite movie of the last...
Favorite movie released in the last year.
In the last year.
I've seen movies that I liked better in the last year, but those are more in the vein of Beckett or The Lion in Winter and stuff like that, which are from the 60s.
Whereas I saw the movie and I thought it was a good movie, but I didn't think it was amazing, mind-blowing. So
how could one of us be so wrong?
You get to decide which one. We were trying to discuss kind of why it was that Jacob felt so strongly about this movie and why I felt a little bit less strongly. So you tell me, which version do you think our followers should hear first?
I think they should hear your side first. That way I don't feel like my side is being trampled on.
Fair enough.
We previously were discussing the movie when we got out of it, and it was very contentious between the two of us because there was such a gap between our two perspectives on the movie. I don't know if this is the way it is for you all, but I've noticed that when you have 2 people who disagree about something, and even if they're on the same side of opinion, they both like something, if one person... this is like neutral, loves it, and the other person likes it, the person who loves it feels threatened by the one who likes it. And also by the same token, I've been on the side of things where I just liked something and I judge someone for loving it.
Right.
Why do you find so much significance in something that hasn't earned it? Why are your values so shallow that you think this is great? It's definitely something I've thought before.
The first time we recorded this, it was the most husband versus wife review that ever existed.
The most husband versus wife review. It's not the most husband versus wife.
Yeah, oh, no.
Yeah, don't put the emphasis on husband.
Yes,
it wasn't the most husband that there's been.
Yes.
I've been more husband at other times in life.
When I saw the movie, there were a few things that stood out to me that I felt made it less great. And they were kind of the things that made it so unique. So one of the things that this movie does is that the entire movie is supposed to look like it's been done in one shot. And there were 2 reasons why I wasn't a huge fan of that. And there's also a reason that I like it. So the reason that I like it is because it does put you in the story. It feels like you're walking through all the scenes, you're experiencing it yourself. I guess there's actually 3 reasons why I wasn't a huge fan of it otherwise. So the first thing that I wanted to mention was that it felt like a video game. And the reason I say this is because I only just recently started playing video games. And so for me, I've started understanding the kind of format of video games where you're following someone around sometimes.
She was playing Red Dead Redemption or Zelda Breath of the Wild, things like that, where you have a third-person perspective on the character, where it's usually as if looking over their right shoulder.
Exactly. And so a lot of this movie is shot just that way, where you're watching the film over someone's shoulder. And so I was watching it and I was like, well, it's kind of like playing a video game. And if I wanted to play a video game, I would play a video game. But instead I'm watching a movie that I'm not able to control. So that was what stood out to me. Rebut it.
So the criticism that there are visual elements that at times bring you to mind what you, if you play video games, you have as a mental image, which is that characters here, cameras here, looking in on them, perspective, that third person over the shoulder perspective. Yeah, that's there. I mean, the camera doesn't hold on it. It's like what many movies do where you kind of follow them from here, then the camera kind of moves around to get facial reaction or look at the environment and then snap back. Mm-hmm. So it's far more dynamic, and enough other movies have done stuff like that. Darren Aronofsky in The Wrestler, he did it there. I mean, I've played a good number of video games. I grew up playing them. It was my hobby. You had better ones. And so I've seen that perspective for many hours. Did not occur to me when I was watching this movie. You mentioning it makes sense. It was not so distracting to me. Maybe because to you, the experience of video games is relatively novel and recent, and so it's very striking. But to me, the conventions of, we'll say, video game cinematography, I take for granted, exist, sure, whatever. This movie doing what it did was so unique that it didn't cross those wires for me. Also, because the camera was dynamic enough and did pan off the shoulder and look around the environment and, like, trace around for conversations between the two main leads, if it were only that way all the way through, especially for more action-oriented sequences, as if looking at the back of their head when they're doing it, that would be very video game-esque. Did not do that. So it's more like you walk into a building and you have third-person perspective so you can feel the dread of they're going into the unknown. You see what they see, and so it's the unknown for you, and you're worried what's going to happen to them. So to me, that was more self-identifying with the dread of the character, and like, things can happen to you, which is actually kind of what a video game is going for. It's going to happen to the character. It's happening to you as the person playing that. But then it moves away from that, and it's dynamic. So I think you're wrong.
Fair enough.
Was not an obstacle
for me. I still felt that way, but
yeah.
I can absolutely understand your view of it. I think that makes total sense. The second reason that I wasn't...
Now we're doing a review of Joker.
Oh, God.
Yeah,
Get me out of
awful
here.
Joaquin Phoenix dancing.
I'm tired of Joaquin Phoenix. The second reason that I didn't love the cinematography was that you knew that something had to happen at every given point. They weren't going to allow him, for example, to get on a truck and ride it for 20 minutes because it's supposed to be happening in real time. There's only one time in the movie where there's a cut, and it's when he gets knocked out. And
well, one of the two main characters.
Yes, one of the two main characters. And the rest of the movie is supposed to be in real time. So I found that kind of distracting because I was always waiting for, okay, when's the next thing going to happen? When's the next thing going to happen? I know that this can't take us too long.
I mean, no, so that's fair about the nature constraint of trying to do a one-shot style movie, because if everything is in real time and we're not going to have cuts that smooth and jump the process, cut to the next relevant scene, unless you're Tarantino in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where you will throw in for fun long extended driving sequences for the mere joy of Brad Pitt's charisma driving a car, which actually is real. His charisma driving a car does exist. But all of that aside, it means that plot-wise, the conceit of this is going to limit what could feasibly happen in the story. It's kind of like how in a horror movie, that bad things happening to the main character only occur in certain shots. When you're in the close-up on the character from a certain angle, you're safe and the jump scare's not going to happen because you couldn't film the jump scare that way. It wouldn't work. Whereas once you go out to a mid-shot, oh no, now I know something's going to happen. Whereas if you're in a really wide shot, oh, I'm safe now because then we wouldn't be able to get the money's worth out of the special effect because we wouldn't see him well enough. So, the mid-shot's frightening in a horror movie. I know, conventions of cinematography, you can only do it here. So in this movie, as you were mentioning, at one point, so main characters are trying to get from A to B. What's helpful in traveling distances? Automobiles! So the main character gets on a truck, a troop transport to go, and that, the movie's not going to cut. So we're not going to watch this guy for the next hour and a half or hour and 15 minutes of the movie sitting in the back of a truck. So he's not going to be on the truck for long. And so certain beats and pacing and elements in the movie you can predict will turn out a certain way, which takes you out of it because now you're thinking about the constraints of the style on the movie. And for something like this, you don't want to be taken out of it like that. It's not like Tarantino where the style is the movie.
Right.
Here, it's meant to get out of the way of filmmaking in general so that you can, like, feel the experience of these soldiers. So it is kind of like it's an irony in this movie that you were pointing out, is that the nature of the style to make it one shot, give you dread, everything like that, give the exhausting nature of this hero's journey through the World War I battlefield. All that's the artistic mission of the movie, and then yet we're being taken out of achieving that because of the very way that you're trying to get there.
Right.
So yeah, no, that's a fair criticism of the movie. Also trying to find the seams. How did they do the next sequence here? Because I know they didn't literally film all of this at once. So when you're watching a magician's act, you're trying to figure out how he did it. A little bit of that in here.
Yeah.
Wasn't an obstacle to me, but I agree that is a fair criticism. It's a fair constraint on the style that you're going for. With that imperfection in mind, still great.
No, and I would agree with what you said. And then the last thing that kind of bothered me, and then I kind of want to say just a couple short things that I liked, was that because the whole thing was shot this way, it felt like Sam Mendes was the main character. The camera was the main character. And I think that may have been the point in a lot of ways, but I'm not a huge fan of that. I'm not a big fan of really artsy films that are for the sake of the art and not for the character development or the plot, or are made, for me, film is about getting to know characters and getting into their heads and going through specific plot things that can't happen very easily on stage or whatever it is. So when the cinematography, which I also am a huge fan of cinematography, I think it's cool, but I don't like when the cinematographer and the director become the main focus of the film.
You don't like it when the style is the substance.
Yes, that's exactly right.
So you say that the characters are the main point of the story, and to me, it's not necessarily so that being character and plot driven is what the point of a film is for its story, for its artistic message. I don't like artsy stuff that's long and indulgent and doesn't actually have a point. We saw the movie We're Never Really Here, starring Joaquin Phoenix at a given weight with a given bad relationship with an awkward mother as a given form of socially estranged, deranged man. Aside from all that, I didn't think this movie was that. This movie did not really care about its characters that much. The actors were acting. They had characters. But it's not a character-driven movie in that you reveal things about the character as they develop and they change over the course of the movie. That's not the point here. Instead, the characters are there so that you care about them as men, so that the horrors and threats and dangers around them, acting upon them, are something that you care about because they're happening to a human being, and your empathy comes into play. And the artistic purpose of this movie was to have a sense of empathy for the scale of horror of experience of being a World War I soldier going through this. And it did it, I think, effectively, and I think it did it in a worthy way. I think that's a goal that does matter. In the same way that poetry is different from prose. Prose, novel, you have a journey, you have a plot, characters develop, you're accomplishing something, and it can be written in spark notes. A poem puts you in a place and a feeling and an emotion, and it says it gives a state of mind in a way that you couldn't just explain in more dry, normal speech. Mm-hmm. It's just a different artistic purpose. This was more like a poem, but it wasn't artsy-fartsy, so it wasn't as incoherent as a poem might otherwise be. And I think it did it. The one shot, I think, accomplished it. You just feel this unrelenting sense of anxiety and exhaustion. You have moments of reprieve that then just kind of shift into horror again. I don't think you could accomplish that the same way with like normal traditional breaks, because you get a reprieve. You have a sense that this scene is for this, this scene is for that. Whereas in this movie, everything just flows, and so you have the sense of like, oh, buoyancy, I'm floating back up out of the deep where I was dragged down, and then, oh god, the horror's coming back, I'm like back underwater.
Well, what I will say is that now that I have had more time for this to kind of percolate, I think the movie's grown on me because the more times we've reviewed this, the more time I've had to kind of reflect on it. And I do think that it's absolutely worth seeing. I think there is more worth to a film like this than I originally gave it credit for. And I do think that there are these special moments in the film that, for me, feed my soul in a way that if this was just, you know, following someone through their trials and tribulations, it wouldn't. But there are some character moments that I think are really, really special and give it that little extra bit of soul, yeah. And so I do think that it's worth seeing. And
Tell us about the scene.
In the movie, there's a moment where one of the main characters shows up and sees this woman who is taking care of another person's child. She found their child in this
war orphan
city,
baby.
And there's just this emotional connection between a soldier and a civilian in this moment where he probably hasn't seen a woman or anyone who's not a soldier for a very long time, especially a baby. And the innocence of a baby in the midst of all of this destruction is, I thought, was really well done and really moving, and a really important aspect of the story that, or of the film rather, that, like I said, gave it that little extra bit of soul that makes it worth seeing.
I mean, yeah, that scene was really quite affecting. And, I think what's poignant about it is, you have the baby in the wartime, you have the woman, and so woman's the domesticity, it's away from war, even if she's caught in the middle of it, like the frontline troops, so he doesn't see that. And the one with the baby, you at once have, like, a feeling of irony that, like, woman in the home front and baby, the future for your country, for any civilization, is there and is so fragile and is so hope-inspiring, but its fragility is so threatened by the mass destruction of the war that it's ironic that a country could go to war for the sake of the fragile woman, the fragile child, but by its nature be so destructive that you can't imagine a woman or a baby existing in the war zone. It's just like that kind of a thing. Not to be hippy-dippy about it, because I'm not being hippy-dippy about it. I'm not extending that to be any kind of a message.
I was not going to say hippy-dippy. I was going to say just very philosophical in a moment that...
Yeah, as a literature major. It's second nature. To the degree it's useful, it's nice. To the degree it's annoying and self-indulgent, I apologize. It's a very good choice to slot that in there. The previous time that we attempted this review, I made this comparison. I just want to make it now. If you've seen Children of Men, a movie from the mid-2000s starring Clive Owen and Julianne Moore, it's a dystopic future story. I believe it was a novel and then adapted to film. Mankind has stopped fertility. Not deliberately, just people have not been having more kids. A new person has not been born in 18 years. And so there's this sense of decay and dread and falling apart to all society because without a future, the economic base is falling apart. People aren't motivated. Depression is rampant. Society is kind of unraveling. The main character ends up being responsible for the protection of the one woman with the first new child in 18 years. And so just there's a moment where there's all this fighting happening and then the baby starts crying and all the adults, all the grown people who are fighting stop. And there's an eerie silence. All these soldiers, all these guerrillas are doing nothing, and they're in awe as the woman is carrying her baby shepherded by Clive Owen down the stairs. It's a very affecting scene. This movie had very strong vibes of it. Just a baby in a war zone, the innocence, the fragility, the sense of context for why any of this would be taking place. Very powerful. Before we go, I do want to say my criticism of the movie. Which is your criticism of the movie. Well, it's more of like a kitschy thing.
Okay.
But you and I shared this. So, your video game analogy.
Yeah.
In the previous edition, you brought up a very important point, which we neglected to say this time.
We're calling the last review of the last edition.
The last edition. Second edition. This is third edition review. New annotations. You have to pay another full price for this. It's like a college textbook.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Guys, subscribe below. That's your payment.
So the movie was like a video game in the sense that it's not just over the shoulder of the character, but you have checkpoints and NPCs voiced by famous actors. What do we mean by that? Well, you may have seen from the trailer that Colin Firth is a general at some point in the movie giving orders to the two main soldiers so that they can go and do their mission. So we start off with like the opening cutscene, a little movie within the video game where a big important plot point happens.
Yeah.
So it's Colin Firth, celebrity cameo, focusing on him.
Yes.
Very conspicuously because almost no one else in the movie is famous except for these NPCs.
Yes, you just keep hitting these famous people. And for a movie
So
that's all about trying to bring you in and make it feel like you're the one experiencing it, it's the easiest way to take you out of the story because you're like, hey, look, it's Benedict Cumberbatch. Like,
hey, look, it's Richard Madden from Game of Thrones and The Bodyguard.
Right.
What? Oh, it's Mark Strong of every Guy Ritchie movie fame. Wow. And it's just like every 20 minutes there's a British celebrity who comes in to be World War I edition British celebrity cameo. And it's like why?
Wow.
Why would you go for that?
Yeah, why'd you do that?
It's so conspicuous. It's so upsetting.
It's funny because if you take an actor and he's well known, but you give him a role, then it gives him the opportunity to be in that role, to be taking on a different character. But when you put him in for 2 minutes just in the middle, it's like, oh, there's that actor.
He came to get a paycheck and lend his credibility.
Right, and it's not to say that they didn't act well. They did, but you have 2 minutes on screen and everyone knows you as and recognizes you. So it just was weird.
Put a mustache on him. It's fine. It's Benedict Cumberbatch? No, it's not. It's a mustachioed British general. It's Mustache General.
He's great.
Yeah, Brigadier General Mustachman.
To finish off this review, I think we all know the answer, but would you recommend this film?
Oh, absolutely. See it in theaters if you can. Whatever is the biggest, baddest cinema experience that you have access to. If it's an IMAX, see it in IMAX. If you have a better quality theater, splurge if it's more expensive than the lower quality theater. This deserves to be full spectrum, full scope. It's something as an experience that film uniquely can accomplish as compared to small screen television, as compared to live theater, as compared to a novel, and it deserves to be respected in terms of what it's trying to achieve.
And I would recommend it as well. Again, I didn't feel as strongly as Jacob, but I do think it's worth seeing, and I would say go see it. So thank you guys so much for watching. Please subscribe to my channel and blog if you haven't already. Head over to my Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook and follow me there, and we'll see you in our next video. Bye!